What's up everyone? Alex here. Nostalgia, and by association, memories, can be a powerful thing. These fragments of thought can both inspire us to create things that are truly mesmerizing, and at other times, frighten and prevent us from ever taking huge risks. And yet, these memories are flawed. Despite that, we're often told constantly to relive and grasp onto these moments as though we're incapable of making new and better ones. No other game exemplifies this more than Final Fantasy VII, where, depending on who you speak to and the circumstances surrounding it, one event could be remembered dramatically differently from one another. One such memory concerns the events told in Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII, which follows the story of one Zack as he rises in the ranks of soldier alongside his peers Genesis, Angeal, and Sephiroth, which I only just recently realized spelled the word gas. Coincidence or veiled meaning? Think about that for a second. But the memories of Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII are limited, as it was released on the PSP more than a decade ago at this point. And with the impending release of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in 2023, we're fast approaching those moments I mentioned where one particular person will be misremembering parts of their past. So it's timely then that we get to the bottom of these memories through Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, a remaster of the original game that seems to do so much more than just a simple glow-up. But one has to wonder, does Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion rely too much on its nostalgia?
Awesome! We're gonna fail!
Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion is an enhanced remaster of the original PSP game from 2007, co-developed by TOES and Square Enix, and published by Square Enix, who provided this review code shown running on the PS5. Crisis Core is a single-player action game releasing on all modern platforms. I also want to point out that Hajime Tabata directed the original release of this game, who's best known for his work on Final Fantasy Type 0 and finishing up Final Fantasy 15. For better or worse, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion sticks to much of what the original PSP game offers. But framing it that way ignores the plethora of brand new features that the game delivers. For starters, the combat feels a lot more fluid and has been modified to deliver a fast-paced action experience. You can't cancel attack animations into others like in other action games though. So this is one of those games that'll require you to stop mashing attacks so you can properly react, study, and read your opponent's tells. That said, this doesn't mean that this makes the game easy, as this design is reminiscent of a lot of older titles, even well before Crisis Core's 2007's release, that ask you to be mindful of leaving yourself open to enemy retaliation. In addition to this, the DMW, the slot machine mechanic that helped define the combat experience, has been modified as well. From time to time, getting certain combinations would play out a cinematic that couldn't be skipped on the PSP version. Reunion allows you to skip through all of these sequences, shortening your gameplay time significantly. While I had apprehensions with the DMW even in its original iteration, I've come to appreciate it as a sort of chaos agent that can really turn the tide of battle when things get rough. And given that it's a bit random, you just don't know what you're gonna get, so you can't rely on it 100% of the time. One other addition that I appreciate is the ability to cancel powerful enemy attacks and having it represented by a meter. This might sound like a small deal, but that's more information than what we got in the original, and its presence brings a level of suspense and intensity that wasn't there before. Despite it carrying the Final Fantasy name, its original release on the PSP meant that it's a game that can be played in small chunks. This design is common in both mobile and portable games, as these form factors allowed players to play them whenever and however they want. So being able to deliver a satisfying experience in short bursts is extremely important. It's because of this that both the main story and side quests don't overstay their welcome, and each quest can be finished in a matter of minutes. This also means that as soon as you get going, you might already finish the quest you're on shortly after, creating a somewhat fragmented experience. That said, I personally didn't mind the short bursts of quests here and there, and coupled with its revamped combat system, it's only made me want to pursue even harder, tougher challenges, which promptly put me in my place. But I won't deny that dying in those instances put a huge smile on my face. Despite enjoying its combat, I have to dock Crisis Core Reunion in parts where it's a bit too faithful to the original. The localization is 100% lifted from the original PSP release, and given how many innovations and passionate discourse have positively affected the quality of localizations of games over the past decade and a half, Crisis Core Reunion stands in stark contrast to more recent work. Granted, it allows us to relive moments like that Zack Gungaga moment, but I'd imagine newcomers joining in from Final Fantasy VII Remake might deem the game's narrative and dialogue a bit confusing, especially without any sufficient context from the rest of the Final Fantasy VII R trilogy. Yep, I'm calling it that now. That aside, I can't deny that the fully voiced dialogue does lift this localization a fair bit, in both good and sometimes unintentionally funny ways. There's a particular scene in the game where a bunch of Shinra scientists are synthesizing materia with sheer intensity, and the seeming disconnect between this feeling and their animation and voice acting made me chuckle a few times.
Commencing materia generation. All hands, confirm status. Ready, sir!
This is particularly due to the fact that impressively, much of Crisis Core Reunion runs on the original PSP code, down to the skeletal framework and facial animations that were used for each character. When you consider that, it's actually really impressive how much of those original functions work seamlessly with the higher resolution models and landscapes. Granted, there are moments where these show their age, but for the most part, Crisis Core Reunion's characters can stand alongside the rest of the Final Fantasy VII R trilogy's characters, and you probably won't even notice much of a difference. Going back to the voice acting, I do think that the actors tried their very best to make do with what they got with the game's localization, so I don't really want to fault their performances here. I think there was an awareness from both the voice director and the actors that the localization would sound a bit kooky because of its age, so it seemed as though the vocal direction leaned towards acknowledging that the language contained within was going to be a bit strange, and I think it served it well in many cases. I wasn't expecting this game to be some massively life-changing experience, and I think that's appropriately reasonable. Apart from voice acting, you can certainly expect the sound design of the game to be vastly improved as well. I really appreciated this aspect of Crisis Core Reunion, as it really helped round out the whole package. Sound effects are now crisp and much more impactful, and the remix soundtrack really adds a new dimension to what is essentially an experience filled with short bursts. Indeed, Square Enix spent no expense to make the audio-visual presentation of Crisis Core Reunion stand out from its original PSP release, and its job to act as a fitting interlude in between Remake and Rebirth. When I think about my experience of Crisis Core Reunion, it reminds me of the many people who wanted to borrow my PSP to play this game back in the day, and that one guy who never gave my wife's copy of the game back to her. Well, joke's on you, buddy, because Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion is every bit better than the original PSP release you jacked. This is more than just a straight remaster. It's a new way of experiencing the game that far surpasses the memories we have of the original, and I think that's a great thing to strive for whenever you're bringing back an age-old classic. It's definitely a risk that was worth taking, and allows Square Enix to buy themselves some time until Rebirth. Removed from that pressure, however, I think Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion is a really fun game, and one that only adds to the legend that is Final Fantasy VII.